Hey guys, Lady Lee here from Lady Lee's Home. Today I want to show you how I can and process in the pressure canner some marinara sauce. Now, a few years ago I wrote a post on the blog about how to can tomato sauce. And when you can tomato sauce, you can just process it in the water bath canner, because the tomatoes themselves are pretty acid, and we also add a little bit of lemon juice to raise the acidity a little bit, and that allows us to process them in the water bath canner. Since when I'm making marinara sauce, I'm adding onions and garlic and oregano and basil. Then adding all those different things, I also add a little bit of sugar. It changes the acidity of the tomatoes, and it's no longer safe to just process them in the water bath canner. It's pretty simple to use the pressure canner, so just to be on the safe side, I process my marinara sauce in the pressure canner. I'm gonna write below this video the recipe and how I do it. I don't have the recipe for my marinara sauce on the blog yet. If at some point I have it, then I'll link it below, but for now I'm just gonna write it down so you have a general idea. If you're a homesteader and you grow tomatoes in your garden, then really you'll have to come up with some sort of process that will fit your situation, because you know, tomatoes are coming in and we can process this amount one day and another different amount the other day. So it's kind of hard sometimes to follow a specific recipe, but I'll write down my process below this video just so you have a general idea of how I do things. Let's go over it really in just a few words. Tomatoes are coming in from the garden. I generally grow either Roma tomatoes or Amish paste for things like tomato sauce and marinara sauce and stewed tomatoes, things like that. So all the processing tomatoes, the best varieties are Roma or Amish paste, canning tomatoes basically. I no longer do this during the summer. I used to process my tomatoes right as they came from the garden, and during the summer when I have 2 bazillion other things to do, processing tomatoes and canning tomatoes is just not on the top of my to-do list. I don't wanna need to do that. So what I'm doing now is putting them in a bag and throwing them in the freezer. It saves me so much work during the summer. They stay in the freezer, just whole tomatoes in a bag, throw them in the freezer. And then in December, November, January, whenever I want, I bring those bags out and I make my marinara sauce. I start with frying onion, then I'm adding some garlic, then I just pile up all of the frozen tomatoes inside of the pot. If you don't want to process tomatoes with their skin, then you'll have to peel them, and when tomatoes, frozen tomatoes thaw, you can just peel the skin right off. You don't need to boil them or anything else like you need to do with fresh tomatoes. So if you want to let them thaw so you can get rid of the skin, that's fine. I also have a post in the blog, on the blog about how to freeze tomatoes, so I'll link to that below too. But I don't really care. I'm blending all of this with an immersion blender anyway, and I don't really feel the skins that much at the end. So I save myself the peeling of the tomatoes, and I just throw all of them in the pot. They will start thawing and softening, and once they are soft enough, I blend them with an immersion blender, and then I add my seasonings. I add one to this big 12-quart pot. I add one can of tomato paste. I add some oregano, basil. I use chicken broth seasoning, salt, pepper, a little bit of sugar. Again, I'll write everything below the video, and then I just let it cook on low heat for hours until it is the consistency that I want it to be. Once in a while I taste, I can, you know, correct the seasonings if I want. And now that it's ready, it's time to can it. I find that really this is the best way for me to store my tomatoes, because then it means that this is ready. This sauce is ready to go. This marinara sauce is ready for me to go. If I make spaghetti, excuse me, we'll eat it just on spaghetti. If I make pizza, I'll use it on pizza. It's just ready for me to use right from the jar. So here's how I do it. I have my quart jars ready to go. I washed them, they're clean. I also washed my lids and my ring. I don't have to sanitize anything because we're going to process it in the pressure canner. So I got my funnel here, my canning funnel. And what I'm gonna do is just fill my jars with the marinara sauce. And I wanna leave about an inch of headspace. Now, when we can, we always wanna make sure that everything is in similar temperatures, right? So I don't wanna can cold, I don't want to put cold sauce into hot water in the pressure canner. I want the jars to be nice and warm too. You know, everything kind of have to keep the same temperature more or less, so nothing breaks. All right, so once I have my jars filled, I leave about an inch. I'm gonna take my bubble remover and just move it around to make sure there are no bubbles caught in the jar. And then I got a damp paper towel, and I'm just cleaning the rim of the jar, placing my lid and closing the jar with the ring. And this jar goes into the canner. The water in the canner, I'm using a Presto pressure canner. And the water in my canner I put about 2 inches of water in there. And I heat the water to about 180 degrees. So kind of like a very, very low simmer. Once I have all of the jars in the pressure canner, I'm going to close it. Okay, I'm going to close it and make sure the weight is off of the vent. Now I'm using a dial pressure canner. If you're using a weighted canner, it might be a little different. So I'm making sure that the weight is not on the vent, and I'm going to turn the heat to high. I want to watch the vent. The water will start heating and the pressure will start build, and then the steam is gonna start coming out of the vent. Once the canner starts to vent, I'm gonna give it 10 minutes to vent before I put the weight on the vent over here. All right, and once I put the weight on the vent, I'm going to watch the dial and wait until it comes to about 11 psi. And this changes if you leave higher than 1,000 feet in elevation. I'll put the table to how to adjust the pressure depending on where you leave. So look in the description below if you leave above 1,000 feet in elevation. Once it reaches 11 psi, I'm going to lower the heat just a little bit to keep the dial, to keep the pressure on 11 psi. And then I'm going to process the marinara sauce for 20 minutes. All right? After the 20 minutes is over, I'm going to turn the heat off, but I'm not going to touch the counter. I'm not going to remove the vent, the weight, or anything like that. I'm just going to let it sit until all the pressure is released, and that might take a couple of hours, you know, until the water inside is cooling a little bit and the pressure is released. Once the dial shows me 0 pressure again, then I can carefully remove the weight and open the canner. And once I open the canner, I remove the lid, but I am not going to remove the jars just yet. I'm going to let the jars hang in the hot water for another 10 minutes or so before I remove them and place them on the kitchen counter, on, you know, a kitchen towel, or on cutting board or something like that. And then you have to give them a few hours, I would say probably overnight, to cool completely. Okay, while they're cooling, you'll probably hear the pop that indicates that the jars has sealed. And to check if your jar is sealed, you can just press in the center of the lid, and if there's no movement there, then it means that it's sealed. Okay, I store my marinara sauce, or I store any jars that I process really without the ring. So I remove the ring, wipe the jar, and then I store it on the shelf. The reason for that is that sometimes the ring sticks and it's hard to open it. Also, a few times I had problems with rust under the ring, or the band. You know, some people call it band, some people call it rings. Also, by removing it, I'm able to kind of look into the jar a little better and monitor if something funky is happening in there. And I can reuse them when I can something else. So I remove the rings and wipe the jars when they're cold, and then store them on the shelf. So that's the process, and I hope you learned something new and enjoyed this video. And please look in the description below for the recipe and some notes. And if you have any questions, ask me in the comments below. And please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video.